Well, Peter said, we'll vote one patient at a time. This is what makes it so special and intimate. So we're very grateful today that one of these patients will tell her story. The story was fulminant C. diff infection. We met about a year ago. Her husband, Tim, would have been for sure one of the 30,000 statistics that would have made it. Because of achieving cures together, because we had the treatment available, we literally pulled him out of the grave. She'll tell her story. It's been a year journey. Come out of journey, illness like that, it's not a recovery over a couple of weeks. You're still recovering. Tell Kathy.
Thank you very much. I just want to say this before I get started that Cindy is Tim's sister. We're just talking, I believe it was last evening. Did we have any idea that we'd be here right now, doing what we're doing right now? A year ago, we had no idea. My family's C. difficile journey started a little over a year ago. On August 30th, I heard a large crash in the hallway, and my husband, Tim, had collapsed, and I knew something was severely wrong. He then began not speaking coherently after multiple hospital visits, and I knew something severely was wrong. And we had gone to various hospital visits, doctor tests, since two strong antibiotics, infectious disease specialists finally diagnosed him with West Nile disease that triggered encephalitis, which is an inflammation of the brain causing neurological symptoms and difficulty swallowing. Tim's health took a downward spiral when he aspirated at the rehab facility and had to return to the hospital to be intubated for pneumonia and receive even more antibiotics. Tim was diagnosed with C. difficile almost a year ago on September 17th and became septic and was moved to the ICU. Tim was on 11 IVs, was sedated and intubated, and the doctor said it wasn't looking good. They had surgeons ready to go asking for permission to remove his entire colon. They didn't know if he would survive the surgery, let alone the recovery. Without the surgery, they also said he would most likely pass away in the night. My sister Jackie was with me at the time, and we called my sister-in-law Cindy, and she's a retired nurse. She was very helpful during this time for me and our kids. We were shocked and devastated, having to make the most difficult decision of our lives. With both scenarios having terrible prognosis, our family decided to not do the surgery. My sister prayed and comforted me during the night. It's hard. Sorry. A miracle happened, and Tim survived the night and actually slightly improved. The next morning, the doctor still didn't want to give me false hope and told me he was still the sickest person in the hospital. A few days later, a new doctor came into the ICU and recommended we see Dr. Kortz at the University of Minnesota for a fecal microbiota transplant. We said, absolutely. We transferred that day, September 25th, to the University of Minnesota, and we met Dr. Kortz.
We're going to talk. Well, he was the sickest person in the hospital where he came from. Uh, he was arguably one of the champion sickest people at the university hospital in that time. He was comatose. His body was filled with fluid. Um, his lungs were, of course, compromised because he was on the ventilator, and the ventilator barely kept up with his ability to produce oxygen. Um, really what we had at that time is prayer and hope. We've done this before for other people in that particular setting of fulminant infection. And sometimes it seemed like magic. In this case, I really thought we need a higher power to be with us. And so we embarked on this journey, and it was arguably, I think, the toughest fulminant colitis case I've had in my career. We've done it over a decade. We pulled him out. Go ahead.
Dr. Kortz, he was so calming and never negative, but let us know we weren't out of the woods. There was a lot of infection, and Tim was still intubated fighting pneumonia. Dr. Kortz completed 3 FMT infections. Excuse me, sorry. 3 FMT transplants in a week's time. After the 3rd transplant, he let me know he was going to be gone on vacation for the week, but that other doctors could perform another microbiota transplant via colonoscopy if needed. While Dr. Kortz was out of town, the hospital called saying Tim's vitals had dropped when they were adjusting him, and we better come to the hospital as he was not recovering very quickly. When we arrived, he was stabilized a little more, but the doctors were saying he had a megacolon that was likely to rupture, and asked again if we wanted to remove his colon. We chose again not to do the surgery. I feel God came into play as shortly after Dr. Kortz called on his vacation to ask how I was doing. I gave him an update about the surgery, and he said, and I said, they were asking me again, Dr. Kortz, they were asking me again. And I have to make a decision. And he said, you don't have to. You don't have to. He took a load of stress off my body. I feel God sent him to us, not only to save Tim, but to save me too. Tim was slowly improving after each transplant, but finally the 4th colonoscopy transplant, October 17th, was when he made a more significant improvement. Tim still has had a journey for recovery, including recovery centers. He was at various more like Bethesda and other recovery centers, and concluding at Burge Kenny in Golden Valley. He still had a feeding tube placed in his stomach, and he also had a trach. Trach was removed after our stay with Bethesda. And then we moved on to acute rehab in the Fairview system. A specific type of antibiotics Tim was on that would not bring C. diff back. He was finally able to come home in mid-February of this year. So our journey was from August of last year until this last, almost the end of February. And Dr. Kortz shared 3 phases of treatment for Tim, which included microbiota capsules that he took in May. In total, during this process, my husband was diagnosed with West Nile disease, encephalitis, aspiration pneumonia, C. diff infection, fulminant and very severe inflammation of the colon, medical sepsis, and profound shock. Tim is still recovering, making small improvements and gaining back pieces of his independence, including we just started recently driving again. One thing that it's pretty amazing, since when we left acute rehab, they said he would be in the wheelchair for 2 years. That didn't last long. One thing that will stick in my mind, though, is Dr. Kortz said to me, gosh, if we only saw him just a week sooner, if somebody would have just told us. So this is my testimony of growing hope, and I would like for you all to meet my husband, Tim. As you can see from the picture here, this was the next morning when he survived that first night. I mean, we went home thinking we were waiting for that phone call. And then the next morning, I never got the phone call. I think I slept 1 or 2 hours that night. Next morning, my son, my oldest boy, he's standing right behind me there, lives in Florida. And I work for an airline. My manager was able to get him home in the first flight in the morning because I knew I wasn't going to be able to work or drive a car. Sorry. And we got to the hospital, and the doctor, we ran into him, my son and I, we ran into him in the hall, and he said he improved during the night. He even looked at me for a moment. So this is why we're so happy in this picture, because we didn't think this was to be. And it's amazing that my husband is here. It really truly is amazing. Thank you, Dr. Krause. Thank you so much for you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.